Welcome back to Free Media. I'm Robby Soave.
And I'm Amber Duke. Vice President J.D. Vance sat down with Face the Nation to discuss Trump's immigration policy, and he came out swinging with this zinger.
I don't agree that all these immigrants or all these refugees have been properly vetted. In fact, we know that there are cases of people who allegedly were properly vetted and then were literally planning terrorist attacks on our country. That happened during the campaign, if you may remember. So clearly not all of these foreign nationals have been properly vetted.
But there are 30,000 people in the pipeline, Afghan refugees.
But my primary concern as the vice president, Margaret, is to look after the American people. And now that we know that we have vetting problems with a lot of these refugee programs, we absolutely cannot unleash thousands of unvetted people into our country.
These people are vetted. These people are vetted.
Just like the guy who planned a terrorist attack in Oklahoma a few months ago, he was allegedly properly vetted, and many people in the media and the Democratic Party said that he was properly vetted. Clearly he wasn't. I don't want my children to share a neighborhood with people who are not properly vetted, and because I don't want it for my kids, I'm not going to force any other American citizens' kids to do that either.
No, and that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I think most Americans agree with me.
Owned.
Yeah, so right, that has been the reaction from conservatives. There's a lot of based J.D. Vance. He clearly, he's very good at this. He does really well in adversarial cable news interviews. I guess to defend her point there, look, clearly there's a need for better vetting of immigrants coming in, and a certain proportion of them, just like a certain proportion of everyone, is dangerous or terrorist inclined or violent or something. But is it, if it's, and we're debating, and some people on my side of the spectrum will say it's an even smaller number of the criminal causing than it is, or a smaller proportion than among the native population. I know people on the right will say that's not true, and the people who are more familiar with those statistics can go at it more than we can. But is it really fair to say, well, we wouldn't let any immigrants in if any single one of them commits violence or has a terroristic predilection? Well, then we would just have an autarky where we'd have no one coming in at all.
Well, he's talking about Trump's recent EO, which implemented stricter vetting standards, because under the previous administration, they loosened a lot of the standards that Trump had enacted in his first term because they wanted expedited processing of both illegal immigrants and refugees. And specifically on the Afghanistan question, that's a very interesting one, because the EO also says that he would consider a permanent pause on refugees from countries that are not able to meet the vetting criteria. And Afghanistan obviously is currently controlled by the Taliban. And even during the withdrawal of Afghanistan, they do not keep terror watch list or law enforcement records like the U.S. would typically expect when vetting people to come into the country. So they didn't even have a database that they could run background checks on for these people. So we let in people who were very quickly arrested for things like domestic violence, for engaging in sexual abuse of minors on military bases, and all kinds of other horrific crimes. And so the question to me is not are we not going to have any immigrants at all, but were the vetting processes that we had in place sufficient? And obviously they weren't.
I mean, that's fine. If we have to have more vetting processes, okay, fine, especially from people coming from troubled regions where there is clear evidence of terrorist activity, or the government, like you said, being the Taliban. That seems fine. I mean, it is the case that some of the people who plan terrorist attacks, a lot of them, in the country, it is they're radicalized remotely, right, from affiliation with ISIS. Now, they didn't come in here that way. That just happens through the process of internet radicalization. So I don't want to, skip that, because it does happen. I was arguing about this on Rising with a guest we had who was who's talking about how this was a Muslim ban, again, that kind of thing. Well, I think that's not exactly fair, because it's not a ban on people for being Muslim, but a greater vetting from people coming from troubled regions of the world, which seems perfectly fine. That said, I find some of the anti-immigration rhetoric from the right a bit much, especially, you're getting into now just not even terrorist crime, but just domestic violence or whatever it is. We have too much of that in our society. I think it's wrong to attribute it solely or even a majority of it to immigrants, even if we disagree on exactly what proportion of it is from illegal immigrants. Like, I want to deal with these problems. I think most Americans do, regardless of whether they're being committed by immigrants or not, right?
Well, I think the difference is not that anyone's arguing that they have a certain predilection towards domestic violence, but that we are a sovereign country that controls who comes in because we have borders, and so therefore you should be extra cautious about the people you let in, because if the idea is you want the best and brightest individuals to be coming and actually contributing to society, then having a past criminal history should be disqualifying.
Certainly, but being someone who's coming from a country where other people coming in have some past criminal association, and then me being treated like that would be unfair to me.
No, I don't disagree with that. The difference, though, there is, like, if you're talking about Afghanistan, there's not a way to screen everybody, so you kind of have no choice but to put a halt on the country until they're able to get their own vetting processes in order. And then it's a separate question if you're talking about people coming from a country that do have those databases, then you would screen between whether that specific individual has a criminal history and the other person doesn't. So you wouldn't automatically put a blanket ban on everyone coming from Mexico, for example, if they wanted to immigrate legally, because you're actually able to vet those people through the Mexican government's databases. And I would say, too, on the illegal immigrant question, just going back to the Biden administration again, one of the problems was that because they were so intent on doing catch and release, they, again, suspended a lot of the processing and vetting protocols, and that's how you ended up with multiple cases where you had people who had previously been either convicted or accused of murder from Central American countries coming to the U.S., or in the case of the rape of Jocelyn Nungary, the 12-year-old in Texas, the two individuals who took her to the bridge and raped her had both been supposedly, quote-unquote, processed at the southern border. So there was a clear gap in intelligence, an intelligence failure.
That's tremendously infuriating, I'm sure, for all Americans. Of course, again, that also just happens with, how many times do we have someone commit viral video of someone committing violence in a city, and then it turns out that person has been arrested and detained like 40 separate times and has all these charges against them. Immigrant status, notwithstanding, it just could be a totally lawful citizen born here.
Yeah, they should go to jail, and then if the illegal immigrant has that history, then they shouldn't get to come in. That's where I'm at.
Fine with that. I don't think that's controversial. Thanks for watching Free Media this week. Make sure to subscribe to our new channel, linked below. See you later.